Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the desert warrior who saved Muslim Spain. The complete life story of Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the man who came from the desert. In the 11th century, North Africa was divided among competing tribes, cities, rulers, and religious movements. Far to the south, beyond the great cities of the Maghreb, the Sahara connected communities that lived by trade, pastoralism, warfare, and long distance travel. From this harsh world emerged a man whose name would eventually become associated with one of the greatest Muslim victories in medieval Iberia. His name was Yusuf ibn Tashfin. He belonged to the Lamtuna, part of the larger Sanhaja Berber confederation. The exact details of his birth are uncertain. Historians generally place it around the beginning of the 11th century, probably around 1010. Even his early life is poorly documented compared with his later career. What we do know is that Yusuf was shaped by the desert. He inherited its discipline, its simplicity, its hardships, and its military culture. Those qualities would later become central to his character as ruler. He would eventually command armies across North Africa and cross the Strait of Gibraltar repeatedly. But before he became the ruler of a vast empire, he was simply one man among the Sanhaja tribes. The birth of the Almoravid movement. The story of Yusuf cannot be separated from the rise of the Almoravids, known in Arabic sources as the Almorabitun. The movement emerged among Sanhaja communities in the Sahara during the 11th century. Its early development was associated with religious reformers and military leaders, including Abdullah ibn Yasin, Yahya ibn Umar, and Abu Bakr ibn Umar. The movement combined religious reform, military organization, and political expansion. The Almoravids gradually moved northward from the Sahara into Morocco. They conquered territory, they defeated rival groups, and they began building a new political order. Yusuf would become one of the most important figures in this transformation. Yusuf becomes a warrior. Yusuf's early military career developed alongside his cousin Abu Bakr ibn Umar, one of the leading figures of the Almoravid movement. Yusuf served as a military commander and administrator. He participated in campaigns across southern Morocco, including operations around the Sus region. He also became associated with the administration of newly conquered territories. By the middle of the 11th century, Yusuf was no longer merely a tribal warrior, he was becoming an organizer. And that ability would prove just as important as his military skill. Historical sources emphasize that Yusuf was a capable administrator and organizer as well as a commander. He understood something many conquerors learned too late. Winning a battlefield was only the beginning. The real challenge was turning victory into government. The road to Marrakech, one of Yusuf's greatest achievements, came not on a battlefield but through the creation of a new political center. Around 1062, the Almoravids established a military camp that would eventually become Marrakech. Yusuf played a central role in developing it. At first, it was essentially a strategic settlement, but it gradually became the capital of the Almoravid state. From this new center, Yusuf organized administration and military forces, while the Almoravid territories continued expanding. Marrakech would eventually become one of the great cities of the Western Islamic world. And Yusuf's decision to develop it gave the Almoravids something they had previously lacked: a permanent center of power. The desert warrior was becoming an empire builder. The moment Yusuf became the leader. During this period, Abu Bakr ibn Umar remained an important Almoravid leader, but Abu Bakr eventually had to travel south to confront rebellions and other political challenges. Yusuf was left in charge of the Almoravid territories in Morocco. This was supposed to be temporary, but when Abu Bakr eventually returned, the political situation had changed. Yusuf had consolidated his authority. He had organized the state, he had built support among the Almoravid leadership, and he had created a functioning political center at Marrakech. According to the historical tradition, Abu Bakr ultimately accepted the new arrangement rather than allowing the Almoravid movement to split into civil war. He returned south, while Yusuf continued building the Almoravid state in the north. This was one of the most important turning points in Yusuf's life. He was no longer simply serving another leader. He was becoming the leader, building an empire. Yusuf now turned his attention toward the consolidation of Morocco. The Almoravid armies fought the Zenata Berbers and other rivals. Important cities fell. Among them was Fez, whose final conquest around 1069 strengthened Almoravid control over northern Morocco. Over the following years, Yusuf continued expanding eastward and northward. By approximately 1082, the Almoravids had established control over most of Morocco and parts of western Algeria. This was an extraordinary transformation. A movement that had emerged from the Sahara had become a major North African power. And at the center of this transformation stood Yusuf ibn Tashfin. But another world was now calling for his attention. Across the Mediterranean lay al-Andalus, and al-Andalus was in serious trouble. Muslim Spain begins to fall apart. By the 11th century, Muslim Iberia was no longer united under one powerful caliphate. The collapse of the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba had produced a collection of smaller states known as the taifa kingdoms. These rulers competed with one another. They fought each other. They formed temporary alliances. And some paid tribute to Christian kingdoms in the north. Meanwhile, Christian rulers were becoming increasingly powerful. One of the most important was Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile. In 1085, Alfonso captured Toledo. The fall of Toledo sent shock waves through al-Andalus. The Muslim rulers realized that their political divisions had become a serious military weakness. One ruler in particular looked across the Strait of Gibraltar toward Morocco. His name was Almoravid ibn Abbad, ruler of Seville. He needed help, and he knew where to find it. The call from al-Andalus. Al-Mutamid and other Muslim rulers appealed to Yusuf ibn Tashfin for military assistance. But inviting a powerful North African ruler into al-Andalus was a dangerous decision. Would Yusuf come only to fight Alfonso? Or would he eventually take control of the Taifa kingdoms themselves? The rulers knew the risk, but Alfonso's growing power appeared even more dangerous. So they called Yusuf, and Yusuf answered. He prepared his army. He crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, and for the first time, the desert ruler of the Almoravids entered the land that would become central to his historical legacy. Crossing into Spain, in 1086, Yusuf ibn Tashfin crossed into al-Andalus with his army. The Almoravid forces joined troops from the Muslim Taifa kingdoms. Their immediate enemy was Alfonso VI. The Christian king had assembled a powerful army. Yusuf understood that the coming confrontation could determine the future balance of power in Iberia. The Muslim armies moved toward the area around Badajoz and eventually confronted Alfonso's forces near Zallaqa, known in European historiography as Sagrajas. The date was 23 October 1086. The armies were ready. The fate of al-Andalus was about to be decided on a battlefield. The Battle of Zallaqa. The battle became one of the most famous military encounters in medieval Iberian history. Yusuf's Almoravid forces fought alongside the army of Al-Mutamid of Seville and other Muslim forces. Alfonso VI's army initially fought fiercely. The battle was brutal. The two sides clashed with cavalry, infantry, archers, and close combat. But Yusuf had an important advantage. His forces were organized in multiple formations, allowing him to commit additional troops as the battle developed. The fighting continued throughout the day, and eventually the Christian army began to collapse. Alfonso VI was defeated. The Muslim coalition had won. Zallaqa had become a major Almoravid victory. For the moment, the Christian advance had been stopped. Yusuf had achieved what the Taifa rulers desperately needed. But the story was far from over. Why Yusuf did not stay? After the victory, something unexpected happened. Yusuf did not immediately conquer all of al-Andalus. He returned to North Africa. One reason was personal and political. The death of his son Abu Bakr required his attention, and the Almoravid state itself still demanded his presence. The first intervention had succeeded. Alfonso had been defeated, but the political divisions of Muslim Spain remained, and Yusuf would soon return.
The second call. The Taifa rulers continued struggling. Their divisions had not disappeared, and Yusuf increasingly saw the political fragmentation of al-Andalus as a threat. The Christian kingdoms could regroup, the Muslim rulers could continue competing, and another disaster could occur. So Yusuf crossed into Iberia again, then again, and eventually his interventions changed from temporary military assistance into something much larger. The Almoravids began taking direct control of Taifa territories. One by one, the independent Muslim kingdoms were incorporated into Yusuf's empire. Seville fell under Almoravid control. Other Taifa rulers were removed. Some were exiled, and the political map of al-Andalus was transformed. Historical accounts describe Yusuf crossing into Iberia 4 times between 1086 and 1103. The fall of al-Mutamid. One of the most tragic figures in this transformation was al-Mutamid of Seville. He had invited Yusuf to help save Muslim Spain, but eventually his own kingdom was absorbed by the Almoravid state. Al-Mutamid was removed from power and sent into exile. The story is remembered because it captures the difficult reality of medieval politics. The man you invite to save your kingdom may eventually become the man who rules it. Yusuf believed political unity was necessary. The Taifa rulers had proven unable to maintain it. So, he imposed unity from above. By the end of the 11th century, much of Muslim Iberia was under Almoravid authority. Yusuf's empire reaches its height. Yusuf ibn Tashfin had transformed the Almoravids into a vast Western Islamic empire. His authority extended across much of Morocco and Western North Africa and into large parts of al-Andalus. His capital was Marrakech. His armies were among the strongest in the Western Islamic world, and his reputation had spread far beyond the Sahara where his career had begun. He had gone from tribal commander to imperial ruler. But Yusuf's personal style remained remarkably austere according to later descriptions. He was remembered as a ruler who maintained the simple habits associated with his desert upbringing. Cambridge's recent scholarship similarly emphasizes the image of Yusuf as a desert-born ruler who retained austere customs even after becoming an emperor. His empire was enormous. His lifestyle, however, remained comparatively simple. The man behind the warrior. Yusuf was not remembered only for military victories. He was also a political organizer. He understood the importance of religious legitimacy. He relied heavily on Maliki scholars and jurists within the Almoravid political order. He also maintained a close connection with the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad as a source of religious legitimacy. Modern scholarship notes that genealogy and political legitimacy were important issues for Yusuf and the Almoravid rulers. This reveals another side of Yusuf. He was not simply a warrior riding at the front of an army. He was building a state. And states require administration, legitimacy, taxation, law, military organization, and political alliances. Yusuf understood this. The last years. By the beginning of the 12th century, Yusuf was an old man. Yet his empire remained powerful. In 1102, he returned to al-Andalus once more and formally established his son Ali ibn Yusuf as his successor. Ali would eventually inherit the Almoravid state. Yusuf returned to Marrakech. He had spent decades building a political order that stretched across 2 continents. But his life was nearing its end. The death of Yusuf ibn Tashfin. Yusuf ibn Tashfin died in 1106 in Marrakech. The exact age traditionally attributed to him varies greatly, and some medieval accounts give an exceptionally advanced age that modern historians treat cautiously. What is certain is that he died after a reign lasting several decades and left behind one of the most powerful states in the Western Islamic world. His son Ali succeeded him. For a time, the Almoravid Empire remained powerful. But history would soon change again. New movements would emerge. New dynasties would rise. And eventually, the Almoravids themselves would disappear. Yet, Yusuf's achievement remained. What did Yusuf really save? The title, The Man Who Saved Muslim Spain, is powerful for YouTube, but historically it needs some nuance. Yusuf did not permanently prevent the Christian reconquest. The Christian kingdoms continued expanding over the following centuries. The Almoravid state itself eventually fell. So, what exactly did Yusuf accomplish? He stopped Alfonso VI's immediate advance at Zallaqa, strengthened Muslim political unity in Iberia for a time, and incorporated much of Muslim Spain into a stronger North African empire. His intervention changed the political balance of the peninsula. And without the Almoravid intervention, the history of 11th century al-Andalus would have been dramatically different. That is why the title works as a cinematic description, but the video should explain the historical nuance. The desert warrior's greatest achievement. Perhaps Yusuf's greatest achievement was not any single battle. It was transformation. He took a movement born among desert communities and helped turn it into an empire. He helped establish Marrakech as a major political center. He consolidated Morocco. He expanded Almoravid power across North Africa. Then he crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and intervened in one of the most dangerous moments in the history of Muslim Iberia. At Zallaqa, he defeated Alfonso VI, and afterward, he transformed the political structure of al-Andalus. Few medieval rulers could claim such a dramatic change in fortune. Legacy. Today, Yusuf ibn Tashfin is remembered especially in the histories of Morocco, the Almoravids, and medieval Iberia. His life connects the Sahara to Marrakech, Marrakech to Morocco, Morocco to al-Andalus, and al-Andalus to the great political struggle between Muslim and Christian states in medieval Iberia. He was a commander, a statesman, an empire builder, and a ruler whose greatest victories occurred thousands of miles from the desert environment in which his career began. His story also demonstrates the complexity of medieval history. Yusuf entered al-Andalus as an invited ally. He left it as the ruler of a large portion of the Muslim territories. He came to defend the Taifa kingdoms, but he eventually abolished their independence. He defeated Alfonso V, but he could not stop the long-term Christian advance. He created a powerful empire, but that empire would eventually disappear. History rarely gives us simple heroes and villains. It gives us people making decisions under pressure. And Yusuf ibn Tashfin made some of the most consequential decisions of the 11th century.
Final reflection. Imagine the young Yusuf standing in the harsh landscapes of the Sahara. There was no way for him to know what the future held. He could not have imagined Marrakech. He could not have imagined the armies of al-Andalus. He could not have imagined standing against Alfonso VI. He could not have imagined that historians centuries later would still discuss his campaigns. But step by step he rose. From the Sanhaja world to the Almoravid movement, from commander to ruler, from ruler to empire builder, and finally across the Strait of Gibraltar to the battlefield of Zallaqa. There, in October 1086, Yusuf ibn Tashfin and his allies defeated Alfonso VI. The victory did not end the Christian reconquest. It did not create permanent Muslim unity, but it changed the course of events, and it gave the Almoravids control over much of the Muslim West. Yusuf died in Marrakech in 1106. His empire would eventually fall. His dynasty would disappear, but Marrakech survived, and the memory of the desert ruler who crossed into Spain remained. Yusuf ibn Tashfin was not merely a warrior who won a famous battle. He was a builder of states, a commander who understood organization, a ruler who transformed a desert movement into an empire, and a man who arrived in al-Andalus when its Muslim rulers were facing one of their greatest crises. For a time, he changed the direction of history, and that is why the story of Yusuf ibn Tashfin still deserves to be told. Thank you for watching the incredible story of Yusuf ibn Tashfin. If you enjoyed this journey through Islamic history, Please like and subscribe to Legend Voice for more inspiring stories from the past.